I know. You just can't believe that, can you? But anyway, oh no, you absolutely can believe that. All right. So, but as a 60-something, person, I kind of look back on my life and see the changes that have happened, and it's kind of mind-boggling. But I think, did every generation go through some things similar? I mean, think about your great-great-great-grandfather. We'll go 3 greats back. Maybe you only need to go 2 greats back. But when they were like, wait a minute, if I want to talk to somebody, we're going to be face-to-face and it'll be a handshake, and you're telling me that you're talking on a box into a microphone, into a megaphone thing, and what's this telephone thing, and how does it work, and you got a dial number. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of, to stretching them a little bit that you could actually talk into a device and your voice be carried across the, town to somebody else. Think, now, to us that's so simple, and that doesn't require any energy at all to think about that, but it would have them. Right? And then the next, remember when cell phones first come out? My first cell phone, the battery was a bag that came separate, and you set it on the middle seat of the truck, and, you didn't, I remember being at the St. Louis Zoo with the kids, right? And a guy was walking around and he had like a man purse. It was the battery to his cell phone. And he's talking on his cell phone in the middle of the zoo. And I'm thinking, oh, that's cool, right? And then they come up, and a pastor friend of mine, we met for lunch, and it looked like an Army Motorola phone, but it was on his hip, and it had to be that big, but that was so cool. I'm saying, if things, and then we went the other direction. I should say we kept going down that road, and our phones got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, right? And then there was the little flip phones, and I loved my old flip phone. If you're still using a flip phone, I'm sorry that, we quit using rotary dial too. You're going to have to give up flip phones, right? All right, so you get what I'm saying, right? The technology is happening and when the internet come out, this is where I'm getting left behind. There's so much you can do on that computer, your laptops, and I try to keep up, and honestly, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but Rich, if it wasn't for Rich, my computer would have went up in a bowl of smoke a long time ago, because I don't get it, I don't understand it, and I know, we've got people that put this thing on the internet, and if it was up to me, we would, anywhere. It's just, so technology, and so for some of you of a certain age, this is no big deal. For other of us, we're struggling to keep up, and here's part of the residual factor, because honestly, I don't want to go back to the days where, the only telephone you used was the one hanging on your wall. I like but it comes with risk versus reward kind of thing, we've just got to accept the facts that, with the technology, there is I don't want to say collateral damage, but maybe it is collateral damage. There's problems that come with the advantages. Comes problems. And I think, are living in a ruder society than humanity has ever experienced before. People that are just rude. I was going to start off and say, what do you know about New York City? And you would have said, well, Statue of Liberty, one of the largest cities in the world, you might have said this and that. But I'm sure somebody would have come up with, the people are rude. They're famous for being rude. And if you're watching this from New York City, shame on you. All right, so it just seems like, we're from the Midwest, and honestly, people here are fairly polite. right? And yet, when you do bump into a rude one, I mean, you're like, well, that's rude, which is the title of the message, by the way. Because here's what I think is a residual effect or collateral damage, from the whole world being connected through an internet. One of the problems is, and again, I don't want to go back to the days before the internet because of all, I needed a part for a piece of farm equipment. I got on, ordered it. It'll be at my door in a Monday morning. There was a day I'd had, in the tractor that I had to buy a part for, the closest dealer's in my near, and that's an hour away, and I'd an hour home, and, and there's no guarantee they would have. You know what I'm saying, okay? So I don't want to go back, but with the advent of this technology and social media, I think our society is getting ruder every day. Because people can hide behind a screen and they will say things to your face, they will say things to you over the internet they would never say to your face. They're just getting rude. And the problem is that we can even fall in to that trap. Is that, you know what, these people, I don't agree with these people, I don't like these people, and I'm going to send a message. And they won't actually, maybe they'll know a name, but I'm not face to face with them, so I can just be, I can just, be the mean girl, the mean guy, I can be rude. And it really is affecting society. I think internet plays a big part in this, and now it's coming out in our politics. I mean, I went through the Abraham Lincoln Museum in Springfield, Illinois, and by the way, well done museum. It's really kind of cool. You know, if you have never been there, it's worth the afternoon. Head down there and see that. But they have all of the newspaper articles and clippings leading up to the election of Abraham Lincoln to be president, and those people, they were. I mean, they didn't pull any punches, but there was a certain civility about their rudeness. Today, we don't have that. We had two senators, and I don't even remember their name. One of them was 98 years old, serving his 30th term as a senator or something like that, And he was, he was on the left, and there was a guy right across the aisle from him who's on the right. And they really opposed each other every day when it come to policies, whether liberal or conservative. And they really, when it come to professionally, they were at odds all the time. And yet, when the older senator fell asleep during a session, the guy on the left falls asleep because he's 90-some years old, still serving, right? He falls asleep. The guy on the right gets up, wakes him up, and says, "Come on, bud, I'm going to take you home." I mean, professionally they were at odds, but personally they respected one another. But we don't see that like we need to see that. And whether it's our sports, oh my goodness, if you got a kid or a grandkid playing in sports and you can't be decent to people, stay home. Send somebody with a smartphone and have the game recorded. Before you go and start a fist fight over whether a 9-year-old was safe or not, And you think that's ridiculous, but it's not. It's happening all the time. So whether, the internet is causing it, or the internet's just adding to it. We are getting in these last days, and I know we almost, that's almost cliche-ish, but we are getting in the last days. And civilization is just not civil. It's, politics, sports, even relationships. We just don't have a problem with being rude like folks used to. Now here's where the Bible stands on this. As a Christian, and you may have that personality that wants to lash out and has no problem with being rude. Some personalities, fear rejection, and they would never do anything rude lest somebody not like them, and all that's problematic. And we're learning all about that. But the fact is this is what the Bible says about Christians. This was understood for 2,000 years. Today, it needs preached. In Titus, it says this: speak evil of no man, to be no brawlers, but gentle, showing meekness to all men. For we ourselves also were sometimes foolish, disobedient, deceived, serving divers lusts and pleasures, living in malice and envy. See, what he's talking to, he's saying, speak evil of no man. In other words, what Paul is telling Titus here, as a Christian, and especially as someone that people look to, that's his position, someone people looks to, he's saying, when you're speaking of somebody else, don't get rude. Don't speak evil of somebody else. To be no brawlers. You don't fly off the handle. And he says, here's the side you should do. Be gentle, showing meekness to all men. That is how society used to act. It is how society we would wish would act. But he says this: for we ourselves also were sometimes foolish. Before you became a Christian, it was kind of human nature just to give somebody a piece of your mind. You were also foolish, sometimes foolish. You were disobedient, deceived, serving divers lusts and pleasures, living in malice. This is an evil intent towards somebody. You're going to do something that has wishing ill will to somebody or something that they are doing. You see it and you can hide behind a screen and you say, well, they didn't know it was me. No, that's the problem. Whether they know it or not, they're living in malice and envy, hating one another. But after that, the kindness and love of God, once you experience the kindness and love of God, our Savior toward men appeared. That's when you got cured, or should be cured, of the rude. You get that? The rude? It's a thing, okay? That's when you should be cured of rudeness. So again, speak evil of no man, to be no brawlers, but gentle, showing meekness to all men. For we ourselves were sometimes foolish, disobedient, deceiving, serving divers lusts and pleasures, living in malice and envy, and hateful, and hating one another. But that's where the society's going. And we can blame the internet, we can blame relationships, we can blame, but these things ought not be among us. And when it comes to society in general, when they see a person who is known to be a Christian, I pray that this is what they see. Now, David knew what it meant to face the rude, okay? David did. When you look at David, and I'm going to give you the backdrop because everybody loves the backdrop, all right? When you look at David's life, he was anointed to be king when there was a king. Now, part of this backdrop is that is insane in this culture and in that era. To be anointed by God, by the prophet of God, to be king when there was a king is almost like a death sentence. Because that king is going to have you assassinated, and there's no reprisal. Why? Because he's the king. And if a king wants somebody assassinated, he just has them assassinated. There's no police force that shows up and says, you know what, we're going to charge you with homicide. It doesn't happen. He's the king. So he's anointed to be king when there was a king. And the way his life kind of went was he ended up being a mentor, or using the king as a mentor. Oh, this is what kings do. And the king and David's king was King Saul. He was the first king of Israel. He was a fairly good king at first, but he kind of went bad. Many people, believe he was crazy there at the end, but he started out humble. But when he got big in his own sight, he started acting like all the neighboring kings. And he was ruthless. And so here he is, and David had a talent. David's talent was he could play music, he could write music, and the king couldn't sleep. So the king unwittingly brought David into the palace, and he would play for him at night. A troubling spirit came from the Lord, and the king wouldn't be able to sleep. So they'd bring a minstrel in, a guy who played music. You probably flip on a radio at night to go to sleep by. Maybe you watch TV to go to sleep by. They would have people actually come in and play music so he could go to sleep. This is how it was. So all of a sudden, David finds himself in the palace and being one of, the king's guys, a go-to guy. He becomes a mighty warrior. He goes out, he does the whole David and Goliath thing. He wins that war. He becomes a fairly notable general. He becomes kind of a genius at that sort of thing. He has many victories. They're contributed to him. And all of a sudden, Saul begins to turn because there's this envying, this jealousy, right? And he takes a javelin and he tries to pin David to the wall twice. So it went from, good kid, he's really knows how to play the harp. Oh, hey, what a mighty warrior is. Hey, I hate him. And he's just rude. And he spends 2 years. Saul spends 2 years chasing David down to kill him. Now, talk about a guy who's getting used to people being rude to him. But what we can learn from this is David knows how to act to people who are rude. Especially when you think of David in his latter years, when he does actually become king, and he has the right to just have people killed. He's the king. He can have people just taken out at his word, right? Hey, the guy's rude to me, get rid of him. The guy did this, that's what kings did. And Saul was bloodthirsty. Saul didn't like what the priest did and had 80 of them slaughtered. I mean, that's what kings did. So now, David has, all the time that Saul was being rude. And that's probably an understatement. All this time that Saul was pursuing David, wishing evil, wishing malice and ill will toward him. All right, and living in malice and envy. And that's where Saul kind of was with David. He just was spiteful of him, hateful. And all that time, David never once said anything bad about Saul. It is not recorded anywhere in Scripture where David had anything bad to say about a man who was trying to kill him. Not just being rude, not just hating him, but was trying to kill him. we don't find one time. And you say, well, that, Saul was, God's anointed, and we know all that. We know that David recognized that, wait a minute, God put him in office. God will take him out of office. I don't need to say anything bad about him. I don't need to, do anything for him. In fact, we know there's a couple times that David had opportunity to slay Saul and wouldn't do it. The man who is the most rude to him of anybody in the world, he could have retaliated against, and David refused to do it. And we might think, well, the implications of killing the king. Well, the implications of killing the king, when you've